Telephone me, please.
Okay, hi, I'm talking to Hayley. She's calling from Scotland. Hi, Hayley.
Hi there, Pete.
Nice talking to you. I particularly wanted to talk to you because you were never a Scientologist, and yet you have some stories to tell because you were actually in a relationship with one for a good number
That's
of
right.
years. How long were you?
I was in a relationship with a Scientologist for 7 years.
Wow.
Obviously, I'm not in a relationship now. I've been what they like to term disconnected. But yes, I think I've got quite a unique take on things because I was
Yeah.
never actually in.
So you're a victim of Scientology, actually.
Sorry?
You are a victim of Scientology.
I consider myself to be because my relationship has ended and I suffered some pretty horrible emotional abuse while I was involved with the Scientologist.
Right.
And also a lot of interference in my personal life from Scientology itself. And that's really why I think it's important that I tell my story in case anyone else is in the same kind of position.
Exactly. So let's turn the clock back then to the beginning, and how did it all sort of like begin for you?
Well, I met my, now ex-Scientologist partner. I had no awareness he was a Scientologist. I'd just come out of a really bad long-term relationship with my son's father because of his involvement in prescription and then later harder drugs. So I was quite emotionally vulnerable, I think, and I knew my soon-to-be partner socially, and he listened to a lot of my problems, and I think he kind of latched on to the thing about the drugs, and he seemed to have some pretty good advice, and he was quite sympathetic.
Can I just ask you something?
A relationship. He never mentioned Scientology.
No.
He used to just talk a lot about therapies and the mind.
Right. When you said that he
emotions
listened,
and things, and I thought, oh yeah, that sounds really quite good, and he seemed really supportive. So.
yeah. Did he have any auditor training? You know how auditors are supposed to listen to people, and you said he was a good listener.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah.
Well, I would say that at the start of a relationship, a lot of it was, looking back, I mean, obviously at the time I didn't realise it. It was almost like he was sort of trying to counsel me, and he liked to talk a lot and get me to talk a lot.
Okay.
And he would say things that seemed quite pertinent and quite helpful, but after 7 years with him, I realised a lot of the things that he was saying were just rote things from Scientology.
Yes.
It wasn't really, an intimate personal connection.
Right.
I feel now, looking back, that he actually saw me as good material for recruitment.
Yes, of course,
or possibly he thought it would be good for him to have a partner that was also a Scientologist, because obviously it's difficult if you're not involved, which I later found out to my cost. So, there's always that element. I feel now that it was a little bit cynical of him because he played on my vulnerabilities, and I think that's how Scientology recruits a lot of young people. Problems with drugs and
Of course, you're
crime
absolutely right.
and
Yeah.
emotional troubles at home. I think they see you as prey, and it's really, really sad because you think there's a genuine desire in them to help you, but actually they want to get you in there and started on courses, which is what happened with me.
Yeah. So that's in the back of his mind all the time when he's trying to start a relationship with you, but he's finding for Scientology.
I think so. I think that they have to find someone that is suitable.
Yeah.
Because I'm aware now that if you don't agree wholeheartedly with Scientology and you're in a relationship with a Scientologist, the very fact of you not joining or going to events, that's taken as criticism, and they put pressure on the person that is in to get you handled and get you in or get rid of you.
Right.
Because they see emotional ties as a threat. That's quite clear to me. If someone is getting information or other perspectives on life and happiness from an intimate partner, they tend not to go and turn to Scientology so much, which in turn means they're not spending money on courses and auditing.
So
I didn't know any of this at the time.
No, I'm just saying, like looking back
You know
on
what
it.
I mean? It's just something that I've slowly. The more I got involved with it, the more I started to see, and I started to question things, and then I would go and, read information because I have access to the internet. I thought, oh my goodness, what they're saying is true. I'm actually going through this. He's taken me into an org, introduced me to people.
Wow.
And I realised then when I was in there, they were sizing me up to see is she a suitable partner for this man, which is really medieval.
Yes,
Horrible.
indeed. Oh, yes, it is, yeah. So,
You know, me, I obviously, because I found out he was a Scientologist, I knew nothing about it other than little bits about Tom Cruise. And I don't believe everything I read in the press, so I wasn't for or against. I was just slightly interested when he said he was a Scientologist. You know, it wasn't I went in there blazing, being hostile to it. So he bought me a book, Dianetics, Modern Science of Mental Health, and I read it. And a lot of it, there were little bits of truth in it, but it was so badly written. And there were so many prejudices in it, particularly against women and things. And I thought, I feel uncomfortable about this. And then when I started to question it, that's when the hostility started to come from him. And he would start to get angry with me just for asking questions, which really isn't a good way to introduce someone to something.
I think Jason Begay
I
said...
was called a moron and...
you've just got to accept it.
Or you're just following the crowd. You have to look for yourself. And I thought, I'm looking for myself. I read the book. And then I signed up. You still there?
I am, of course, yeah.
Yeah, I signed up. He said, well, you maybe get more out of it if you sign up for a course. And I went into the org to a couple of events with him. And that disturbed me because I think there were a couple of events where it was about past life experiences and presentations on new materials that they'd repackaged.
Right.
And I felt under scrutiny when I was there. And they would try and isolate me from him and get my name and my address and number. And they were really keen on getting me signed up to do something called a case analysis.
Right.
And auditing. And I thought, I'm not signing my name to anything. It means giving out personal details, so I was really wary of it. And the one thing that put the seal on it when I went there was at the end of all these presentations, they used to turn in the room, and there was a big photograph of L. Ron Hubbard, and they would all turn, every one of them, and applaud it. And I thought, it's like something out of Korea or Nazism. You don't applaud portraits of people. And the guy I was seeing was normally so like punk and rock and roll when he was out in there. I thought, why are you doing this? And it really put the wind at me.
Applauding the portrait freaks a lot of people out. Sorry?
They pressured me into doing a communication course, which I refused to do in the end. I thought, because I can communicate perfectly well. You can tell from me speaking to you now that I can.
Totally.
But I did a correspondence course relating to the book. He was pressuring me to do it. And I thought, what state of mind I was in, I don't know. Maybe because I was so vulnerable from the last relationship I had. But I thought, I'll do it to keep him happy. And I did it. And I wrote exactly what it said in the book, which is what they told me to do, and I got 100%, but I didn't believe a word that I'd written.
Yeah.
And then after that, I said, I don't want to do another course, because they said you have to write just what it says in the book. You know, I've got a degree in ancient history. I'm able to analyse information for myself. And what can you possibly be gaining by regurgitating something that's in the book?
That's a good point.
Take no for an answer. That's when the pressure started. The phone calls, the letters. One time, a guy from York came around and actually opened my front door to put some materials inside. I was in the kitchen, so he walked into my house and invited, and I thought, no, I'm drawing the line at that. It was awful.
That's incredible. Did you tell me as well that you discovered that they'd actually been writing knowledge reports on you?
Not on me, on him.
Oh, right, but your name came up in it or something.
Sorry?
Didn't your name come up in the knowledge report?
I found, he stored a lot of things in my house while we were in our relationship. The reason being, I found out, I don't really want to negate the guy, because actually he's without the Scientology, he was lovely, and I see him as a victim as much as I am, or more so in fact. But I remember when we first met, he was a bit shy about taking me to his house, and I said, it doesn't matter, I'm not bothered about mess. And I walked in, and I don't know if you ever watched those Hoarders programs. I literally had to cut a pathway from the front door to the kitchen. The lounge you couldn't sit in, there was no settee. The bedroom, the bathroom, there was nowhere to sit. And he said, I'll give you this big soup tin, and I sat on that.
Whoa.
And the majority of the hoard was Scientology material.
Oh my
letters, flyers, magazines, boxes and boxes of courses he purchased and obviously never had time to study.
Yeah.
And I thought then, this has taken over his life. And a lot of the stuff, he had his house done up and he needed to store, well, parts of his house, the bits they could reach. He had a new kitchen put in, and so he stored a lot of things at my house.
Right.
And on a lot of the material, I saw my name written, and I was quite alarmed by it because it said things like, get her in for auditing, get Hayley in for auditing, Hayley to see chaplain. And I thought, what on earth has this got my name written on for? So I thought, he's obviously been discussing me with them.
Yes,
And they're
yes.
trying to pull me in and get me handled over things. And then I saw a couple of pieces of sheets of coloured paper, and I knew from stuff I'd read that really important things in Scientology, where you're being handled, are done on coloured paper.
Yeah, there's a different colour for
And
each
so-
division, I believe.
Yeah, it was blue paper, and I think I'd read somewhere it was a knowledge report. But he'd always denied that there was any such thing as knowledge reports, because I'd asked him about it. But there clearly were knowledge reports, and I'm afraid to say I read one,
Oh.
and it was from way before he met me, and it was from his org, and it was telling him that he was in a condition of doubt because he'd taken someone out to dinner. He'd been seen in Edinburgh taking someone out to dinner, and that they had heard that he was buying his son a motorbike for his birthday, and that he'd also planning to buy himself a bike. And it said, we don't know if he's done this yet, but he needs to be in for handling because he hadn't bought a DVD or said he couldn't afford auditing. And I thought, that is crazy. That is an infringement on your own private spending. It's got nothing to do with then what you spend on your own family. And when I read it and realised he'd accepted it,
Wow.
was still with them. This was years old. I was horrified. It felt like the day when I discovered my ex-partner had been smoking heroin and the evidence was there. I thought, this guy is as addicted to this organisation as someone is to drugs.
That's a good point,
They
yeah.
have control over his life. And then I saw my name written on things and it terrified me. I thought, what do they know about me? What has he told them about me in auditing? Not that there's anything in me to hide, but I thought that's my private, personal relationship with him that they're invading. And
That's
they
right.
have no right to do it.
Yeah, they think it's normal to do that. They think it's quite normal to invade your privacy. In fact, they're actually encouraged to do so.
I know that, and I know for a fact that because I was so, I wasn't hostile, but because I asked so many questions and eventually became hostile, I actually wrote to them and said I didn't want any further contact with them because he made me do that. He said, you have to, this was not long before our relationship ended, he said, if you don't want to contact them, you have to write and let them know why. And I said, why? He says, you just have to. You have to. And I thought, yeah, they're precious. So I did. I wrote a letter and I showed it him, gave him all the reasons why I didn't want to go in there, their sales tactics, their invasion of my privacy. He agreed with everything I wrote. I made sure he read it. And I sent it in to them. And then I knew, I said to him at the time, that's the death warrant for us. Because when they see that, you'll have to get rid of me. Handle me or get rid of me. 6 months later, he got rid of me.
My God.
So, yeah. But there were so many, it's an invasion of your private life, but it's not just your private life they control, it's everything. Your finances,
True.
there are constant demands for money. He was always taking in envelopes full of cash. And they ask for donations, but they're not donations, they're actually demands for payment. And I think, if he's been audited and given all information about his private life, I've no doubt they can use that to blackmail them, because their auditing files aren't secret. They hold information on him that they can access at any time to keep him in. So like I say, I feel he's a victim as much as anything.
Very
I'm
much
angry
so,
with him
yeah.
for letting himself get involved in it, but I don't,
Yeah.
I don't hate him, it's the organisation that I hate. But the worst thing, I'm sorry I'm going on, I'm just on a
No,
rant
that's
now.
okay,
The worst
that's okay.
thing I
It's
found
fascinating.
it was the things to do with his health in particular. When I was involved with him, he had an accident on a motorbike just outside the house. It was his son had a bike and he was just trying it out briefly, and he gave it too much throttle and it spat him off.
Right.
And we ran up the road to pick him up. The bike was badly damaged. He was in agony. His shoes had flown off into the neighbour's garden and stuff. We got the bike back, his son carried him into the house, put him on the bed, and for 6 hours he lay on that bed and got a touch assist off his boy, which
Well,
is basically touching various points
Yeah.
of the body and getting him to acknowledge that he could feel it. Feel my finger, feel my finger.
So-
I was told to shut up. I wasn't allowed to say anything. He was drifting in and out of consciousness. He was rambling. he was saying things like, I'll make good the damage about the bike and everything. And his groin, he was just doubled up in pain, and I was frightened that they wouldn't let me call an ambulance.
So he had a motorcycle accident and
Yeah.
then was subjected to 6 hours of Scientology
He
touch
asked-
assists
He asked for them,
Right.
but his son went along with it.
before they
And
called the ambulance.
Sorry?
This is before they called the ambulance.
They didn't call an ambulance. My first thought was let's call an ambulance, but they said no. Well, he said no, and his son just went along in agreement with it.
Oh
And
my
it was in
God.
my house, on my bed, he lay there, like I say, for 6 hours, being touched with a finger, and he was rambling. There was no thought given to whether he had concussion, a brain injury, internal bleeding. I was terrified. But I was so scared by this time of saying anything against his beliefs, because I knew how important it was to him. That I went along with it, and I can't believe now that I did it. His son eventually went, because he had to get the bike back home before it got dark, and left him here with me. I didn't know anything about touch assists, and all I could do was sit on the end of the bed and just comfort him and say, I think we need to call an ambulance. And he wouldn't let me, and eventually he was like crying in pain, and he was rambling again, so I phoned an ambulance, and they came round and they were angry with me.
Wow.
I really had to kind of cover up how long he'd been there. I couldn't mention Scientology, I wasn't allowed to. I couldn't
Interesting.
mention any details of the accident, and I went in the ambulance with him to hospital, and I knew the ambulance drivers were thinking, what is wrong with her? What has she done?
Yeah.
You know, because he was virtually incoherent, and I think they must have thought I was some kind of a mad woman. But I stayed with him in the hospital. He drifted in out of consciousness again. Then he wouldn't take any painkillers because they're not allowed to take painkillers, and eventually he blacked out with the pain.
Whoa.
Came round
Yeah.
and they persuaded him to have some morphine. He was in hospital for a week.
Jeez.
He'd ripped all the ligaments from the inside of his leg. The crash helmet had a big dent at the back of it, so he'd obviously had a head injury.
Jeez.
And I realised at the time, had he died or had a serious injury or brain damage, who would have been responsible?
Yeah.
In my house, it would have been me. I would have
Ah.
probably gone to prison for it.
And it would have been bad PR for Scientology. They'd have had the hooks in you for that as well.
Yeah, but they would have denied it, wouldn't they? I'd
Well,
have been,
they
I would have
do.
been made
They
liable.
do.
I probably would have been made liable. It's the proving of it, you know what I mean? But it
Yeah.
horrified me. I even had to phone the org while he was in hospital and tell them what painkillers he was being administered
Oh my
with.
God. Yeah.
In
This
case
is
he needed, because if he came out, he might need extra auditing to get rid of all the damage that they had done, which would cost him. And
yeah.
he came back to my house. Obviously, he couldn't leave his own house because there's so much clutter of Scientology materials. He had to stay here for a month because I had a downstairs bedroom, and I looked after him. I phoned around all his students. I rearranged his work schedules. I cooked for him. I cleaned for him. I did all the things that you do for someone that you love.
Yep.
And the only thanks anyone got was for the touch assist. He wrote a letter of commendation to the org for his son for doing the touch assist, and I didn't get a mention. And I thought, great, this is nuts.
Yeah. They have a very misplaced sense of duty.
Yeah, there was no loyalty, and I didn't do it for gratitude. I did it because I loved him, but it felt such a slap in the face for me. It broke my heart. And then later, when I became ill, a couple of years ago, I had really bad, I'm not sure if it was norovirus, but I've been vomiting for 4 or 5 days, and he just got angry with me. And I remember sitting in the car with him. We were going Christmas shopping. I said, I really don't feel up to it. And he said, oh, you'll just ruin the day if you don't come. So I sat there with a sandwich box being sick in it, and eventually just retreated to the car. And after 4 hours, he came back and asked me why I was still ill.
Oh
And
my
then when I
God.
got home, he was screaming in my face, saying, it's not good enough. I'm sick of you looking miserable and being sick. You have to get better again.
Have you since looked up about the PTSSP doctrine and how when
I
you
always had that quoted at me. I'm a potential
Right.
trouble source, or you're subject to an SP, you've got someone in your
Right.
life that's suppressive. I heard all of that. I had a virus, for God's sake.
was it a suppressive virus?
Yeah. I mean, I had this before. I remember when he had... It really upset me about the illness, because he was just so harsh to me. And after all I'd done for him, I thought, that is really, really cruel. But I just carried on. I was sick, cooked his tea, was sick, and went to bed again. I thought, yeah, you've got no empathy or sympathy, because they don't agree with sympathy. They say sympathy kills.
Well, you've
So
seen
you're
the
not
tone
actually
scale,
getting
right? You've seen
Yeah,
the tone scale,
absolutely
and
ridiculous.
the tone scale
But, I mean,
is
how-
like a Bible to
I
them.
remember when I first knew him, when I first met him, he had this awful ear infection, inner ear infection. It was so bad. I said, your ear smells like a tuck biscuit, a cheese biscuit, and you're leaking green fluid onto my pillowcase.
Oh, God.
You have to get something done about it. And obviously he'd been having cysts and stuff because it was before I knew him, and he actually got the infection after he'd been on a Purist course
Right.
with them in a sauna. Anyway, I just had enough. I said, you can't come here unless you go to a doctor and sort it out because I can't stand the smell. It's making me heave. So he went to a doctor, antibiotics, it was gone in a week. But his
Yeah.
hearing's damaged.
Oh, my God.
Yes, his hearing, he was always going, and I said, that's because you didn't get medical attention for that ear. But he just doesn't agree, he wouldn't agree with me.
Of
He would
course.
argue black and blue, it was nothing to do with that.
What is wrong with them? Do you know, like listening to you, it's absolutely fascinating because, like I know it from the Scientology view, and I know it
Yeah.
from the view of what it's like when you are a WOG, and you're kind of like straddling both camps in a way.
Yeah, it was difficult. It was so damaging to me because I saw stuff, like I think I mentioned to you at the start, I wasn't hostile, I was interested.
Yeah, yeah.
But the more that I saw, the more I would go and read things, and I think, oh my God, all this, what they call black PR, is true because I'm witnessing it in my own life. It's not black bloody PR, it's true.
That's right. That's right.
They're interfering in your life, they're taking your money, they're affecting your health, they're interfering in your personal life.
Mm-hmm.
I think one guy from York had a discussion about me with him and said, why haven't you persuaded her to buy the next book in the series? I need to get my stats up or something by
course,
Thursday.
yeah.
And then I thought, what? And then I went and read up about that's a big pressure on them in these orgs. They need to have their stats in by Thursday.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, you're biting my boyfriend here to get him to make me buy a book for your stats. You're interfering in my personal relationship.
Yeah.
And I just went insane with it.
Yeah, I don't
It was
blame
very
you.
difficult because at the same time I read books like Steve Hassan's because I wanted to help him and find out why he'd got involved. And I was
Yeah.
reading books that would maybe give me the techniques to possibly persuade him gradually out of it.
That's
All
excellent
the time I was
because
sitting here like, 'cause I couldn't tell him I was reading these things.
I was going to ask you actually.
Like that.
I was going to
I was
ask you.
completely censored in my relationship.
Yeah.
And if he knew I was reading these things, I knew he would disconnect from me. But I was reading them not to be horrible. I was reading them because I loved him and I wanted to save him from
Yeah.
it.
And find out
And
how
I
to
had
help
this
him. Yeah.
constant tug at my heart and my head, probably for the last 5 years. For the first 2 years, it was all very confusing. And then when I'd established what was going on, it was difficult. But I didn't give up on him. I didn't want to abandon him to it.
Wow.
Because I know now that he's not with me. They'll be there for him. But not in a good way.
No.
He'll go back, he'll need more auditing to get over our relationship because we were
Yeah.
very, very, very close.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So in a way I felt like I gave up on him, but I couldn't do any more because I started to speak out about things and he took that instantly as criticism and that was it, I was blanked. But all through our relationship he used shunning as a method of controlling me, which is something he's probably learnt from them. If I said something about Scientology he didn't like, he wouldn't speak to me for 4 weeks. He wouldn't phone, he wouldn't text me. He once frog marched me around the block to calm down because I think I'd said that a presentation on a Dianetics DVD we'd been watching was really cheesy and American. That's all I said because it was. And he had this straight, his face used to change from the lovely, good-humoured guy I knew to this blank, cold expression. His eyes would look almost black.
Yeah.
And he walked me around the block and I had to go one direction and him the other. And if he felt that he was still angry with me at the end of the walk, he was going to go home. And he did, and he didn't talk to me for 4 weeks.
Oh my. Whoa.
And I became this victim again. Almost his personality when he was like that, it was a narcissistic kind of thing. And I'm not sure if Scientology creates narcissism because they have just so many arrogant attitudes towards illness, homosexuality, people who have no money. That I found really, really distasteful. And this would impinge into the relationship that we had.
Yeah.
He would look down on me and say that I was kind of a lesser being, or the favourite one was moron. He never used the term woke because he knew I would say that's a racist term. And then I would look it up and I would find out that Scientology classes people that aren't Scientologists as lesser beings, and they term them wokes.
So he actually called you a moron.
That's my favourite term, or raw meat. I would never, he would never actually come out with stuff like that because he knew then he was rumbled.
Yeah.
Because the worst thing about it is I think he knew deep down that it's flawed, but he was addicted to it. Either his mind is controlled or his finances or both. That's another thing I found really difficult, was that I think he understood that it was wrong, and yet he couldn't let go of it.
Yeah, no, I think you're dead right. I think you're absolutely right, and your analysis is tip top. And I'm really glad that you came across Steve's book. We're going to have to cut our little chat short here because we've been talking for quite a long time.
Yeah, there's probably a lot more I could say, but I
well,
won't.
do you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to talk to you again at some other time, and we can have a part 2 if you like.
Yeah. Because there'll be lots more things that come into my mind.
Ooh.
But my main reason for talking is my relationship with him is over.
Yeah.
There's no way, unless he leaves Scientology, I can't see him again. It's as simple as that. I wouldn't want to while he's in there, and he won't be allowed to while he's in there. My hope for him is that he sees the light.
Yeah.
I've written a letter to him and sent it, and I don't know if he's even been allowed to read it, but I said that our relationship is over on those terms. If you ever need a light in a dark place, come to me. I'll be there for you. And I mean that.
Yeah.
I have no hatred towards him.
Right.
It's the organisation that I despise.
With good
and
reason.
That's all I can leave him with, really. And I wish him well, and I just hope that he gets out of it. But
on that note, Hayley, we'll end there. And thank you for talking. And
thank you for letting me talk.
No, you're welcome.
For me.
You're welcome. And I'll talk to you real soon, okay?
Okay.
Okay, bye.
2, 3.